Okay, here we are. We're here to talk about Cat Burglar, which I have not seen a lot of discussion about. What this is it's an interactive, animated, short cartoon experience, I guess, there on Netflix. I know that Netflix has been trying to move into games in some sense. Whether or not these kinds of interactive entertainment pieces are going to be the extent of Netflix's step into games, or whether they're gonna move into full-on video games at some point, I have no idea. But for the moment, this does seem to be a pretty solid commitment of theirs, because the other previous one, the standout example, was Bandersnatch, which was a Black Mirror interactive movie. I think it was technically a feature film, which I never really engaged with. I fell off of Black Mirror pretty early on. I don't like a lot about it, but that's neither here nor there, except that the creator of Cat Burglar is apparently Charlie Brooker, who is Black Mirror man. He's a writer on Black Mirror. He might even have a creator credit on Black Mirror. So, okay, this British guy who has some experience in interactive entertainment is heading up this pretty strange and interesting animation project. And right off the bat, okay, we just talked about the Cuphead show. I will be comparing this to the Cuphead show a little bit later on, just for my own entertainment, basically. Like, having seen that so recently and talked about that show so recently, I want to make some direct comparisons. But whereas the Cuphead show and the Cuphead game itself focuses on like 20s and 30s era American animation, this is very much heavily based on the Looney Tunes, basically just tons of Looney Tunes stuff. The Looney Tunes style of animation, which was aped by some other studios as well around the same time. And here, just in terms of the technical aspects of Cat Burglar, like the animation, the music, voice acting, storytelling, visual gags, this is so spot on. Like, it is extremely spot on. It's not innovative. The only innovative thing here really is the interactive component, which I respect. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But outside of that, no, it really does just feel like a direct and extremely obvious and direct homage to Looney Tunes cartoons. And the music in particular, I really want to point out, because it is done so well. So well. I'll find the name of whatever composer worked on this and put it up on the screen for you. My goodness, just in terms of recreating that exact same feel, it's done here 100%. Like, I can find no issues with how the music was executed here. It follows the Mickey Mousing technique, which refers to when the music mirrors actions on the screen exactly. At times, it might even substitute for a sound effect, although it doesn't here in Cat Burglar. But it's that technique, which is very old and not very common anymore in contemporary animation. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out. And yeah, like I said, the only innovative aspect is the interactive component. Outside of that, the only part that sort of strays from old Looney Tunes stuff is that it's definitely more serious. It's a little bit darker in terms of some of the visual gags, and obviously the old Looney Tunes cartoons were incredibly violent in a goofy way, but here it's just straight up violent sometimes, and it does it might surprise you if you aren't exactly expecting that from this show, cartoon, whatever, but it's here. Yeah, and in general, like, there's a pretty consistent sense of humor that also runs through the trivia, because that's the interactive component here, is that you're answering trivia questions. I'll put that in quotes, because sometimes it's not technically trivia, it's just kind of like funny jokes that almost seem like trivia, but it's great. And overall, and this is where I will compare it to the Cuphead show a little bit, I never really felt like the Cuphead show had a really solid vision of what it was and what it wanted to be and how it wanted to feel and all this different stuff. It felt like a hodgepodge that was sort of including these elements from the game, but not super effectively. Here, I feel an incredibly consistent vision. It is just so darn delightful for me to engage with this thing. And I haven't like 100%ed it yet. I've won a couple rounds. I've lost a couple rounds. Each round is probably under 10 minutes. I think it varies depending on which gags you get, based on whether you fail or succeed at certain rounds of trivia. For the question segments, you get 3 questions that you have to answer within just one big allotted time limit. And if you get even one of those wrong, the Cat Burglar character will fail whatever predicament he's currently in, and you lose a life. You get 3 lives, and then you lose that round. And then if if you win, you steal one of the priceless painting or whatever it is. And I think you can maybe get a total of 6 or 7. I'd have to go back and look at that end screen. Yeah, you're not just done after you've successfully finished one round. There is a reason to go back to it. And as the characters tell you straight up, because they break the fourth wall a decent amount, they'll just say, hey, look, it's going to be a completely different experience next time around, which isn't always completely true. Of course, like you'll see similar segments, similar setups and predicaments. Thankfully, it does skip like the intro sequence if you just choose to keep playing, and it'll take you to like sort of a checkpoint. But outside of that, it does give you different gags. It gives you different trivia. Every time I've played, it's been different sets of trivia. And the trivia itself, although it's still in quotes, like you do actually have to be on your toes. You can't just sort of pay attention to this thing and then try to catch the trivia as it comes up. Like, no, you have to be paying attention. You have to be on it, and you have to answer these pretty much as quickly as you can, because those time limits are not too generous. And like I said, some of the trivia is just like straight up jokes. Like some of the answers are jokes. Sometimes the premise itself is a really good setup for a joke. One of my favorites, I don't want to spoil like many specific jokes, but it was like, okay, out of the two options, pick the mythological creature, and it had on one side unicorn and on the other side a supportive father. So like it's definitely aimed at a slightly older audience. I wouldn't say completely that this is not suited for children whatsoever. That's up to you as a parent or whatever. Like some of the violence is kind of serious. Some of the gags are a little bit adult, although I don't think it ever, as far as I've seen, it never really goes into the territory of just straight up like inappropriate or anything like that. But yeah, what is here, it does seem like it's aiming for an older audience. I also think kids would just have a hard time playing the game to begin with, just reaction times and everything. And on top of that, if you have like a bad remote, like a bad TV remote that isn't reliable, like mine with my TCL TV, it's kind of tricky. Like you actually kind of have to really, like I said, really pay attention and really be engaged. Otherwise, you know, because you have to hit inputs multiple times sometimes. And then I haven't tested it on computer. I assume it's a mouse input or maybe arrow keys on the keyboard, something like that. Please let me know if you have that information. The game isn't necessarily like the focus. And I will say one of the only drawbacks I can think of is that when the trivia stuff is up, you're not watching what's happening on the screen. And though it can be cycles that sometimes that'll just loop until, you know, the time runs out, I do kind of want to just watch it. I kind of wish that I could engage with this cartoon not as an interactive experience, but I just enjoy the animation and the production and the humor so much. It is, I don't know, the specificity of the interactive element here is just, I don't know how often I'll go back to it. But so far, I've really enjoyed playing multiple rounds. I probably played it a lot longer than I should have because I have a lot of stuff to do. But so far, it's been just a really nice experience. One of the only other small criticisms I can make here is that I don't know whether it's an issue of how it's loading up different segments of animation or what, or just the transitions from one segment to the next. But there are times where following a trivia section and based on success or failure, it'll pass you on to the next segment based on what you did there. At times there will be these awkward audio cuts, and it's mostly on the music where all of a sudden one music track will just cut completely, really awkwardly, and then move on to the music for the next segment. And that doesn't seem like it's on purpose. It could also potentially be an internet connection thing. For me, my internet's absolutely awful. So maybe it's just having a hard time loading in the new part, but it doesn't sound like the music transitions are very are smooth. They don't sound like successful transitions a lot of the time. So that kind of pulls you out of it a little bit, but that's a pretty small technical nitpick up against a shockingly successful, just fun Looney Tunes piece of animation. It's just kind of a good time. If you like visual comedy, if you're curious about this at all, just play it for a little bit. Play it for a little bit, get a few laughs, and even, oh my gosh, compared to the Cuphead show, again, even both shows use film grain and scratch effects to mimic an old film print. They work better here. The film grain and scratches are less distracting somehow in this instance. Like they're just plain better done than they were in the Cuphead show. Most of what's here works pretty darn well, at least for me and my experience engaging with this game. It's basically just a game, isn't it? So yeah, if you really think you'd be interested in this at all, please do check it out. I'm interested to see whether people will pick this up online and really start talking about it, or if it'll just kind of blow over after a couple weeks. That seems like the more likely case to me. Meanwhile, 30-second Cuphead clips are getting like 200,000 views for some reason, like just mediocre stuff. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Cat Burglar. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.